Mr. Widemouth. Hello. So I'm kind of figured I'd tell you guys about some stuff that I recently remembered. In fact, I kind of had a rude awakening almost. So I guess I should start off and give you guys some background. During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river. We never really stayed in the same place for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was around about, I think I must have been 8 or 9. We remained there until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the dusty attic of my brain which belong to the various houses I lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear, kind of pointless. I remember chasing after another kid in the backyard of a house in North Carolina. I remember trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment that my family had rented in Pennsylvania, and so on, so forth, and whatnot. But there is one set of memories which kind of remains as clear as glass, almost as if they were just yesterday's. I kind of wonder whether these are dreams that I've had, or some random, thing brought on by the by this period of sickness that I was experiencing. But in my heart and in my gut, I know they're real. So we were living in a house outside the metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine. It was around about, I think, just under 700 people living in that area. It was a large place, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I just didn't even look at during the 5 months we stayed there. It was kind of a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time. Well, the only one that's within an hour's commute to my dad's place of work. I think it was more or less the day after my 5th birthday. Unfortunately, just me and my parents were there. I came down with pretty bad fever. Doctor said that I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and a lot more fever for at least about 3 weeks. Might have been a month, but I can't fully remember. It's pretty bad timing. We were in the middle of packing our things to move away to Pennsylvania at this point, and most of my things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room pretty barren. My mom brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, and they ended up being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Nevertheless, she still got bored though. Around this time, my memory is still a little foggy, but somewhere I ended up meeting Mr. Widemouth. Well, not really somewhere, just somehow, I guess. Must have been about a week after I was diagnosed. My first memory of him was just asking him if he has a name. Not even how he got there. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because, well, he had a pretty wide mouth. Everything about him was pretty, I guess, large in comparison to his body. His head, eyes, ears. I remember those ears. Crooked as hell. But he was pretty on the nose with it. He did indeed have a pretty wide mouth. You look kind of like a Furby, I said as he flipped through one of my books. He stopped and gave me a puzzled look.
Furby? What's a Furby?
He asked. I shrugged. You know, the toy. The little robot, big ears, you can pet them, feed them. Almost like a real pet.
Oh,
Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity.
you don't need one of those. They're not the same as having a real friend.
I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped by to check in on me.
I hide under your bed.
He later explained.
I don't want your parents to see me. I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore.
We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, seemed pretty fascinated by the stories and pictures that they contained. Third or fourth morning after I met him, he greeted me with a larger smile than normal on his face.
I have a new game we can play. We have to wait until after your mother comes to check because she can't see us play. It's a secret game.
After my mom delivered more books and also some soda this time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from the bed and tugged on my hand.
We have to go to the room at the end of the hallway.
I mean, I objected. My parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission, but he persisted until eventually I kind of gave in. The room that he was mentioning was pretty barren. Didn't have any furniture or wallpaper. Not exactly the place that you'd want to play a game, but I trusted him. The only distinguishing feature was a window that was bang on opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and pushed the window open and beckoned me to look out at the ground below. So, the room is on the second story, but the house is on a hill, and from this angle, the drop was, it looked a bit further than 2 stories, probably due to the incline.
I like to play pretend up here,
he explained.
I pretend that there is a big, soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try.
So, being a 5-year-old with a fever, you only have a little bit of skepticism that darts through. And I looked down and considered the possibility. It's a long drop.
But that's all part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline.
I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by anyone else. But thankfully, the realist in me prevailed. Maybe some other time. And I said, I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt. I remember his face contorting into a snarl, almost, but it wasn't for long. I think anger gave way to disappointment.
If you say so,
he said. It's kind of a miserable git. He ended up spending the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The next morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box.
I want to teach you how to juggle,
he said.
Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons.
I remember looking in the box and just seeing a bunch of knives. They did not look the blunt kind. Are you kidding? My parents will kill me. Very horrified that he'd brought knives into my room. They were not the kind of thing that my parents would let me touch anyway. I'll be grounded for a year if they see me with any of these. What are you thinking? Mr. Widemouth frowned.
It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it.
I pushed the box away. I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw in the air. Again, his frown deepened into a scowl. He ended up taking the box of knives and slid under my bed, again, remaining there for the rest of the day. I remember wondering, how much time did he actually spend in my room? Or at least thinking about it. But I guess I stopped paying attention after a while. Although I did start having trouble sleeping after that. He'd end up waking me up saying that you put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that you can't see in the dark because it's that high. I always said no. Just tried to go back to bed, and he'd persist. He'd even try staying up till early hours of the morning trying to get me to jump, but I wasn't having it. It wasn't that fun. At least not anymore. I remember some point later on, my mother came to me and told me that I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would do good for me, especially after being confined in my room for so long. Obviously, being a 5-year-old that's been locked in your room for a while, suddenly getting a bit of freedom seems like a blessing. So I was pretty excited. I ended up putting on my sneakers and ran out to the back porch. I just wanted to feel the sun on my face again, get some fresh air. But yet again, Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me.
I have something I want you to see,
he said. I must have given him a weird look, as he then followed up with,
It's safe, I promise.
I reluctantly followed him to the beginning of a trail, which ran through the woods behind my house.
This is an important path,
he explained.
I've had a lot of friends around your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. But one day I hope to take you there.
I didn't think much of it at the time, so I ended up going back to the house. Though I did wonder what kind of place was at the end of that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into a moving truck. I would be in the cab of the truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I'd be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps the creature's intentions weren't exactly to my benefit. For this reason, I didn't tell him. Kept it a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime the next day, with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a six-pack of energy drinks. It seemed more like a man who was about to run a marathon than one who was about to spend 2 days sitting still. Early enough for you? Yes. I nodded and placed my head against the window. Probably just figured I could get some sleep before the sun comes up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. This is the last move, son. I promise. I know it's hard, as sick as you have been, but once that gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends. I opened my eyes as we backed out the driveway, and I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood there. Didn't move. Not until the truck was about to turn onto the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye. With, not an empty hand. I could tell it was one of those knives. I didn't wave back. A few years later, I ended up returning to New Vineyard. The piece of land our house stood upon was empty except for the foundation. Apparently the place had burned down a few years after my family had left. Out of curiosity, I decided I'd follow up on that trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Don't know why, but a part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the pants off me. But the rational part of my brain thought that, it's probably just a figment of my imagination, just a fever dream that I was going through at that time. Just a very vivid one, I guess. But I also thought maybe he was somehow attached to the house. Maybe now that the house had gone, maybe he wasn't around anymore. So I walked and kept following the trail until I got to the end, where I found myself at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I thought maybe I'd not followed the trail right or something, but then, after taking a look around, I noticed something that seemed to be a fairly common instance in this cemetery. Mainly that a lot of these headstones, well, they belong to children. All around ages 5 through 9. I'm glad that my family moved when we did. No matter how much I might be missing some of my old friends and wasn't able to ever really settle in, at least I'm here. I do wonder what happened to him, though. Then again, it's probably a good sign that I haven't heard anything about him. At least then it can just be a story on the internet. No harm done. Just a story. Hello, my name is Sheffdan. You just finished listening to Mr. Widemouth. pretty classic creepypasta and one of my favorites. This is the first reading that I've ever done for any type of story, let alone a creepypasta. But I thought that I would give this a go because I remember listening to some audio renditions of old creepypastas back when I was a kid, and I thought I might give it a go. So the next one that I'm looking into will probably be something from the No Sleep Reddit. But until next time, stay safe, stay indoors, keep your mask on. Good night.